The grand court of the Zyphorian Empire was filled with silence. Every noble, warrior, and high-ranking official watched as Princess Sirica sat on her golden throne, her violet eyes sharp and cold. Another suitor stood before her, a proud Zyphorian warlord, his battle scars proof of his strength. He had traveled across the stars to win her favor. Sirica looked at him without emotion. "You are strong," she said flatly, "but strength alone does not impress me. You are dismissed." Gasps filled the room. The warlord clenched his jaw, his pride wounded, but he could not argue. No one ever argued with Sirica. She had rejected every suitor who tried to claim her. No male in the empire was worthy of her. As the warlord left in anger, Sirica let out a quiet sigh. This was always the same. Males bowed, tried to impress her, and when they failed, they left, defeated. She had no interest in any of them. But something new caught her attention. A human stood at the edge of the court, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with an amused expression. Unlike the others, he did not look nervous or impressed. He did not bow. Sirica narrowed her eyes. This was Lucas Kane, a diplomat from Earth, sent to negotiate an alliance between humans and Zyphorians. Unlike the warriors who sought her hand, he was not here for her. He was here for business. Sirica had heard about humans. They were weak compared to Zyphorians, yet their intelligence and unpredictable nature made them dangerous. Lucas spoke to an elder Zyphorian general, laughing at something. Laughing. In her court. Sirica's fingers twitched in irritation. No one laughed in her presence unless she allowed it. She rose from her throne, her presence commanding instant attention. The court fell silent. Even Lucas stopped speaking, his gaze now locked on her. "You," Sirica said, pointing at him. "The human." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Yes, princess." Sirica stepped forward, her tall frame towering over him. She expected him to shrink back, to bow like all the others. But Lucas just smirked. "I do not remember allowing humans to speak so casually in my court," Sirica said coolly. Lucas tilted his head, pretending to think. "Oh, my apologies. I didn't know I needed permission to talk." Murmurs spread through the court. No one spoke to Sirica like this. Sirica narrowed her eyes. "Do you think yourself above my rules, human?" Lucas shrugged. "No, I just don't see the point in bowing to someone who's never earned my respect." The room froze. Zyphorian stared, expecting Sirica to punish him for his insolence. But she didn't. She just stared at Lucas, something new flickering in her expression. For the first time in her life, someone had defied her, and she did not know how to feel about it. The court was silent. Every Zyphorian present held their breath, waiting for Princess Sirica to punish the human for his insolence. No one spoke to her like that. No one ever dared. But Lucas Kane stood his ground, his expression calm, almost amused. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he seemed bored. Sirica's sharp eyes studied him. "You do not respect me," she stated, her voice dangerously quiet. Lucas met her gaze without hesitation. "Respect is earned, not given," he replied. Gasps echoed through the room. A Zyphorian noble almost choked on his drink. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons, waiting for the command to strike him down. Sirica, however, did not react with anger. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if seeing Lucas for the first time. She had met thousands of males, most of them warriors, proud, powerful, and desperate to impress her. They always bowed. They always begged. And yet this human, this outsider, refused to do either. "Interesting," Sirica murmured. Lucas smirked. "Glad you think so, princess." The casual tone in his voice irritated Sirica more than she expected. Zyphorian males usually spoke with reverence or fear. Lucas spoke to her like she was normal. She hated it. She loved it. Sirica stepped closer. "Tell me, human, if you do not bow, do you expect me to bow to you?" Lucas chuckled. Of course not. I don't need anyone to bow to me. Serica's fingers twitched. That answer was unexpected. Before she could respond, a deep voice interrupted. The human is insulting our empire. A massive Zyphorian general, Commander Orvis, stepped forward. He was a brute of a warrior, standing nearly 8 feet tall, his scared armor proof of countless battles. He mocks our traditions, Orvis growled. He should be challenged. Murmurs of agreement spread through the court. A challenge. A duel. The Zyphorian way of settling disrespect. Serica turned to Orvis. You believe this human should fight you? Orvis smirked, cracking his knuckles. It would be merciful. He wouldn't last 5 seconds. Lucas sighed. Yes. The usual fight me to prove respect nonsense. Typical. Orvis narrowed his eyes. Afraid, human. Lucas yawned. More like bored. I don't waste time on fights I can't win. Orvis laughed. Then you admit you are weak. Lucas smirked. No, I just prefer winning in ways that actually matter. Serica's gaze sharpened. Lucas wasn't afraid. He was strategic. He knew when to fight, and when to outthink his opponent. An idea formed in her mind. If a fight is unnecessary, Serica said, then we shall test him another way. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what test would that be? Serica's lips curled into a dangerous smile. You will find out soon, human. Lucas Kane stood in the center of the royal court, surrounded by tall, powerful Zyphorians. Their eyes burned with disapproval, some with amusement, but most with anticipation. Princess Serica remained on her throne, her violet gaze locked on him. She had never met a male like him, one who refused to bow, refused to fight for her favor, and yet stood completely unshaken by the power around him. She found it annoying. She found it intriguing. A test, Serica announced, her voice carrying through the hall. Not of strength, but of strategy and wit. If this human is as clever as he claims, let him prove it. Lucas smirked. Oh, good. I was hoping for something less barbaric than a fistfight. A few warriors growled at his insult, but Serica simply smiled. Let us see if you still find it amusing, human. She clapped her hands, and the ground beneath them shifted. The polished floor panels retracted, revealing a holographic battlefield, an ancient Zyphorian war simulation. It was a game of tactics, used for training generals and testing the minds of future rulers. The objective: command an army in battle and defeat your opponent. Serica rose from her throne, stepping down to stand beside Lucas. You will play against me, she declared. The court erupted in surprised murmurs. Serica was undefeated in this game. Many great warriors had played against her, and all had failed. Lucas raised an eyebrow. You? I thought a challenge was supposed to be fair. Serica smirked. Are you afraid, human? Lucas chuckled. No, just making sure you're ready for your first loss. Gasps filled the room. A Zyphorian noble nearly dropped his drink. Serica's eyes gleamed with challenge. Then let us begin. The game begins. The holographic battlefield came to life. 2 armies, one controlled by Serica, the other by Lucas, faced each other across a massive digital war zone. Serica made the first move, deploying her forces with perfect coordination. Her tactics were sharp, her formations flawless. Lucas watched, analyzing. Then he smirked. Instead of meeting her forces head-on, he did something unpredictable. He divided his troops, sending a small, weak-looking squad straight toward Serica's strongest warriors. The court laughed. A foolish move. His army was about to be crushed. But then, something happened. At the last moment, Lucas's weak squad vanished, revealing themselves as a distraction. Meanwhile, his real forces had outflanked Serica's army, striking from an unexpected angle. Serica's forces collapsed. The court fell silent. Serica's eyes widened. How? Lucas grinned. You were too focused on power. You never considered deception. For the first time in her life, Serica lost. The princess clenched her fists. This human had defeated her, and she had never wanted to crush or understand someone more. Lents filled the grand hall. The holographic battlefield flickered as the simulation ended, confirming Lucas Kane's victory. Serica stood frozen, her violet eyes locked onto the screen. The Xiphorian princess had lost. She had never lost. The court remained quiet, waiting for her reaction. Some looked at Lucas with new respect, while others clenched their fists, struggling to accept that a human had outmaneuvered their princess. Lucas, meanwhile, stretched his arms casually, as if he had just finished a simple game of chess. "Well," he said with a smirk, "that was fun." Serica's sharp gaze snapped at him. Fun. He had just humiliated her in front of her court, and he called it fun. She took a step forward. "You tricked me." Lucas shrugged. "No, I played the game. You focused on power. I focused on winning." A ripple of murmurs spread through the court. Some nobles nodded in agreement, impressed by his confidence. Commander Orvis, the Xiphorian warrior who had wanted to challenge Lucas earlier, growled. "The princess was too lenient. If she had played seriously, you would have lost." Lucas turned to him with a relaxed expression. "If she wasn't playing seriously, that's her fault, not mine." Orvis clenched his fists, his massive frame radiating anger. Xiphorians were warriors, and they respected strength, but this human's arrogance was unbearable. Serica, however, lifted a hand. "Enough." The court fell silent again. She stepped closer to Lucas, studying him. This human was different. He had not only defeated her, but also stood before her without fear. And worst of all, she didn't hate it. She should have. She should have despised him. But instead, there was something else growing inside her. Curiosity, irritation, a strange, unfamiliar excitement. Serica lifted her chin. "Do you believe you are better than me, human?" Lucas smiled. "At that game, yes." Another gasp echoed through the court. Did he not know who he was speaking to? Serica's lips curled into a dangerous smile. "Then tell me, Lucas Kane, what is it you want? A reward for your victory? A title? Gold?" Lucas shook his head. "I don't need anything from you." That answer stung more than she expected. He was supposed to demand something. He was supposed to seek her approval, like everyone else. But instead, he treated her as if she was just another person. Serica narrowed her eyes. "You truly expect nothing." Lucas smirked. "I didn't come here to play games, princess. If you want my respect, earn it." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the court in stunned silence. For the first time in her life, Princess Serica felt something impossible. She wanted someone else's approval. For the first time in her life, Princess Serica was distracted. She sat in her private chambers, her fingers tapping lightly against the armrest of her chair. She had gone over the simulation match with Lucas at least 10 times in her mind, yet she still could not understand how he had beaten her. It was not just the loss that bothered her. It was his attitude. Lucas Kane had won. He had humiliated her in front of her court. And yet, when she had offered him a reward, he refused. No Xiphorian male had ever rejected her attention before. But Lucas had walked away without hesitation. Serica clenched her fists. Why did it bother her so much? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A royal servant entered, bowing deeply. "Princess, the human diplomat is preparing to leave." Serica's gaze snapped up. "Leaving?" She stood immediately, brushing past the servant and making her way to the palace corridors. Her steps were quick, purposeful, yet she forced herself to appear calm. She had no reason to be upset. Lucas was just a human. He was irrelevant. And yet, she found herself searching for him. A confrontation. Serica found Lucas in the palace docking bay, speaking with his escort. He was preparing to board his human vessel, a sleek, practical craft that looked unimpressive next to the towering Xiphorian warships. She should have let him go. But she didn't. Lucas Kane. Her voice was sharp, commanding. It echoed through the bay, making several guards straighten in surprise. Lucas turned to look at her, raising an eyebrow. Princess Serica. Serica stepped closer, folding her arms. You are leaving without requesting an audience with me. Lucas smirked. I didn't think I needed permission to leave. Serica's jaw tightened. She hated that smirk, that relaxed, completely unaffected expression. Why did you refuse my reward? She demanded. Lucas sighed, as if bored. Because I don't need your gold, your titles, or your approval. Serica's fingers twitched. Every warrior, every noble, every leader in this empire fights for my attention, she said, her voice colder. Yet you turn away. Why? Lucas tilted his head, studying her. Then, with a calm, steady tone, he spoke. Because I don't chase after people who think they're above everyone else. Serica's breath hitched. She had always believed herself superior, the strongest, the most intelligent, the most desirable. And now, this human, this outsider, was treating her like she was just another person. For the first time, she felt truly challenged. Lucas turned to leave, but before he could take another step, Serica spoke. Stay. It was not a command. It was a request. Lucas hesitated. And for the first time, Serica felt uncertain. Lucas Kane paused. The word stay hung in the air between them, softer than Serica had intended. She never asked. She commanded. She ordered. Yet, for the first time in her life, she had spoken a request to a human. Lucas turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable. Why? Serica stiffened. She hadn't expected him to ask that. No Xiphorian male would have questioned her. She could have given 1,000 different reasons. Because you intrigued me. Because you frustrated me. Because no one has ever looked at me the way you do, with indifference. But she said none of those. Instead, she lifted her chin. Your skills in strategy are interesting, she said, carefully choosing her words. You may have some use. Lucas chuckled, shaking his head. So that's how you ask for something, huh? By pretending it's a logical decision. Serica narrowed her eyes. It is logical. Lucas crossed his arms. No, it isn't. You don't want me here because of strategy. He stepped closer, eyes sharp with amusement. You want me here because you don't like losing. Serica's fingers twitched. He was too observant. I do not care about losing to a human, she lied. Lucas smirked. You sure? Serica hated that smirk. Because every time she saw it, she wanted to wipe it away, or worse, understand why it made her heart beat faster. Lucas sighed, glancing back at his ship. Fine. I'll stay. A flicker of relief flashed through Serica, but she masked it instantly. Good. Then you will report to. But, Lucas interrupted, raising a finger, on one condition. Serica folded her arms. You are in no place to make conditions, human. Lucas smiled. Then I guess I'll leave. Serica's eye twitched. She had never met someone so stubborn. What condition? She asked, barely holding back her irritation. Lucas grinned. You stop treating me like I'm below you. No more commands. No more acting like I should be grateful to be in your presence. Serica's pride screamed at her to reject his demand. Yet, a strange part of her did not want him to leave. She exhaled, keeping her face calm. Very well. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Really? Serica narrowed her eyes. Do not make me regret it. Lucas laughed, stepping past her. Don't worry, princess. I think this is going to be fun. Serica watched him go, irritation and intrigue swirling inside her like a storm. Lucas Kane was unlike anyone she had ever met, and now she had made sure he was staying by her side. Princess Serica walked down the halls of her palace, trying to maintain her usual composed expression. On the surface, nothing had changed. She was still the untouchable royal, the ruler whose decisions shaped the Ziforian Empire. But internally, her thoughts were chaotic. Lucas Kane was staying. That should have been the end of it. A human diplomat, useful for his strategic mind. Nothing more. And yet, the memory of his calm smirk, the sound of his confident voice, his refusal to grovel, it lingered. In the past, when Serica commanded, people obeyed without question. But Lucas, he seemed to enjoy pushing her limits. He didn't see her as some untouchable goddess. He treated her like an equal, or worse, a rival. And for reasons Serica couldn't fully explain, she wanted more of it. A chance encounter. Late that evening, Serica found herself near the palace gardens. She hadn't intended to come here, but the quiet, open space calmed her restless mind. The moonlight reflected off the crystalline plants, and the air was cool and still. She didn't expect anyone else to be there. But then she saw Lucas. He was standing by one of the glowing trees, arms crossed, staring up at the sky. His expression was relaxed, thoughtful, and, for once, completely serious. For a moment, Serica hesitated. She could have turned back. She should have, yet her feet moved forward anyway. Couldn't sleep? Lucas asked without turning around. Serica stopped a few steps away. I did not give you permission to address me so casually. Lucas turned, a small smile playing on his lips. No, you didn't. But you're here, and you're not exactly stopping me. Her jaw tightened. You are insufferable. Only if you let me be, he replied with a shrug. What brings you out here, princess? Serica glanced away, her gaze settling on the horizon. I could ask you the same question. Lucas gestured to the sky. Just thinking. Your planet's moons are something else. Earth's only got one. And it's not this bright. Makes it hard not to stop and stare. Serica studied him. For once, he wasn't being arrogant or sarcastic. He seemed genuine. It unsettled her. I do not understand you, Lucas Kane, she said quietly. Lucas chuckled. That's funny. I was about to say the same thing about you. Her gaze snapped to him. What is that supposed to mean? You're different than I expected, Lucas said simply. At first, I thought you were just another proud ruler, too full of yourself to see past your own reflection. But now, he trailed off, giving her a curious look. Now what? She demanded. Now I think there's more to you than you let on, Lucas said, and I'm starting to see it. For the first time in her life, Serica felt her heart skip a beat. Princess Serica walked down the halls of her palace, trying to maintain her usual composed expression. On the surface, nothing had changed. She was still the untouchable royal, the ruler whose decisions shaped the Ziforian Empire. But internally, her thoughts were chaotic. Lucas Kane was staying. That should have been the end of it. A human diplomat, useful for his strategic mind, nothing more. And yet, the memory of his calm smirk, the sound of his confident voice, his refusal to grovel, it lingered. In the past, when Serica commanded, people obeyed without question. But Lucas, he seemed to enjoy pushing her limits. He didn't see her as some untouchable goddess. He treated her like an equal, or worse, a rival. And for reasons Serica couldn't fully explain, she wanted more of it. A chance encounter. Late that evening, Serica found herself near the palace gardens. She hadn't intended to come here, but the quiet, open space calmed her restless mind. The moonlight reflected off the crystalline plants, and the air was cool and still. She didn't expect anyone else to be there. But then she saw Lucas. He was standing by one of the glowing trees, arms crossed, staring up at the sky. His expression was relaxed, thoughtful, and for once, completely serious. For a moment, Serica hesitated. She could have turned back. She should have. Yet her feet moved forward anyway. Couldn't sleep? Lucas asked without turning around. Serica stopped a few steps away. I did not give you permission to address me so casually. Lucas turned, a small smile playing on his lips. "No, you didn't, but you're here, and you're not exactly stopping me." Her jaw tightened. "You are insufferable." "Only if you let me be," he replied with a shrug. "What brings you out here, princess?" Serica glanced away, her gaze settling on the horizon. "I could ask you the same question." Lucas gestured to the sky. "Just thinking. Your planet's moons are something else. Earth's only got one. And it's not this bright. Makes it hard not to stop and stare." Serica studied him. For once, he wasn't being arrogant or sarcastic. He seemed genuine. It unsettled her. "I do not understand you, Lucas Kane," she said quietly. Lucas chuckled. "That's funny. I was about to say the same thing about you." Her gaze snapped to him. "What is that supposed to mean?" "You're different than I expected," Lucas said simply. "At first, I thought you were just another proud ruler, too full of yourself to see past your own reflection. But now," he trailed off, giving her a curious look. "Now what?" she demanded. "Now I think there's more to you than you let on," Lucas said. "And I'm starting to see it." For the first time in her life, Serica felt her heart skip a beat. Days passed, but Serica couldn't shake Lucas's words from her mind. His steady gaze, his quiet confidence, his refusal to fawn over her, they lingered in her thoughts, disrupting the careful balance she had maintained for years. She had never known what it meant to desire someone's respect. Respect, loyalty, obedience. These had always been granted to her as a matter of duty. She never needed to earn them. But Lucas had flipped her world upside down. In her private chambers, Serica paced. She hated the uncertainty that churned in her chest. She hated that, for the first time, she was unsure of what to say or do. Should she speak with him again? Should she confront him, demand an explanation? But what would she demand? Why did she even care what Lucas Kane thought of her? Finally, she stopped, her hands curling into fists. No, she wouldn't let this confusion consume her. She was the ruler of the Zyphorian Empire. She had faced countless adversaries. She could handle one human. A meeting in the gardens. That evening, she found Lucas once more in the palace gardens. He seemed to favor the quiet, moonlit space, standing among the crystalline trees with his arms crossed, his head tilted toward the sky. "Lucas Kane," she called. He turned, his expression neutral. "Princess Serica, to what do I owe the honor?" There was that tone again, calm, confident, and not the least bit intimidated. It should have irritated her, but now it only made her more certain of what she needed to say. She approached him, her steps deliberate, her chin held high. "I need to know why you remain so unaffected by me, by this court, by everything around you." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "That's a pretty broad question. Could you narrow it down a bit?" Serica stopped a few paces away from him, folding her arms. "Why don't you bow to me like everyone else?" He studied her for a moment before answering. "Because I don't see you as a goddess. You're a person, Serica. An impressive person, sure, but still a person. And I treat people like people." She looked away, his words striking deeper than she wanted to admit. "So you don't respect me?" "That's not what I said," Lucas replied. "I respect you plenty. But respect isn't the same as fear. I think you've gotten so used to people fearing you that you don't know what to do when someone just sees you as you are." For a moment, she didn't speak. The truth of his words weighed heavy on her. She clenched her fists. "Lucas Kane," she said softly, almost hesitantly, "I need you to stay." He blinked, surprised. "What?" "I need you to stay," she repeated, her voice steady despite the vulnerable truth in her words. "Not as a subordinate, not as someone beneath me, but just as you are." The court was silent as Serica and Lucas entered together. The large, crystalline throne room gleamed under the ambient light, and every eye turned toward them. Serica's usual commanding presence was undeniable, but something in her bearing had changed. She stood as she always did, head high, shoulders straight. But this time, Her steps felt different. There was no smugness, no arrogance. Instead, she carried an air of quiet determination. The noble council members whispered among themselves. They had heard rumors. Rumors that the princess had requested the human to stay. Rumors that Lucas Kane, the outsider, had done what no Xiphorian male could, made the princess pause, reconsider, even respect him. When they reached the center of the room, Lucas stood at her side rather than behind her. The court noticed this, too. Serica took a deep breath. "I have made my decision," she announced, her voice steady and clear. "Lucas Kane will remain as my trusted advisor." A ripple of shock moved through the room. A human. An advisor. But Serica raised her hand to silence them. "He has proven his value, not only in strategy but in perspective. He challenges me in ways that I did not expect, and he has shown me that respect is not demanded, it is earned." Lucas glanced at her, his expression unreadable, but he didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "Some of you may question this choice," she continued, her violet eyes sweeping over the council. "But the Xiphorian Empire does not thrive on tradition alone. It thrives on strength, yes, but also on innovation and insight. Lucas Kane has shown me that there is strength in understanding, in seeing others not as tools to be used, but as equals to be valued." For a moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, the council members began to nod. The whispers turned to murmurs of agreement. It was clear that Serica's words had reached them. Lucas finally spoke, his voice calm. "I appreciate the honor, Princess, but I have one condition." The room tensed. The audacity of this human, making demands of their princess, was almost unthinkable. Serica raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching into the faintest hint of a smile. "What condition?" "That you stop calling me human all the time," Lucas said. "My name is Lucas." A few nobles chuckled, the tension in the room easing. Serica herself let out a soft, amused sigh. "Very well, Lucas." In that moment, the dynamic between them shifted. No longer was it just a clash of pride and defiance. It was a partnership built on mutual understanding and respect. As the court dispersed, Serica and Lucas stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, not as ruler and subject, but as two individuals who had finally learned to see each other clearly. The end.